Okay, we are going to cover the first, what we call chapter of paper 2. Okay, and it is introducing Indian society. Right on the first question that we are going to attempt today. The question is, write a note on. Question number 1, write a note on G.S. Ghurye. Write a note on G.S. Ghurye, Indological perspective. Write a note on G.S. Ghurye's Indological perspective of understanding Indian society. Of understanding Indian society. See, the question the thing is that, I was just going through the syllabus and I felt that, most of the thing, even if the question is not going to cover, we are going to, as usual, वो background में अपन try करेंगे समझने के लिए, ठीक है? That is the thing. So to start with, first of all ना, हम लोग को समझना है paper 2 में approach कैसा रहा है? Which are the approaches through which, major, what you call sociologists has tried to talk about in paper 2, ठीक है? तो अगर आप लोग देखोगे तो prominently we could divide into book view and field view, ठीक है? Book view and field view are the two prominent, what we call distinct, way through which we have studies Indian sociology, paper 2, okay? In book view, we have multiple schools again, okay? And similar is the case of field view. In the book view, the prominent schools, it would be, okay, so book view could be divided into two prominent schools only to start with. Cultural and then historical. And cultural is then divided into Indologist. Then we have little and great tradition. And then we have the Louis Dumont, right? The pure and impure one. The pure and impure theory. Okay? So book view of Indian sociology can be still divided into cultural and historical aspects. Okay? Cultural aspects are the one who would be, what we call talking about Indian society in terms of culture. Okay? And in that we have prominent the Indologist. That is the question that we are going to just now attempt. Okay? And then we can have little and great tradition. McKim Marriott wala jo hai. I would be explaining each of the schools, okay? So that you guys are able to apply it also. As usual, just last time we discussed the gender queer theory and everything, so that you are able to apply it. So would be the case in this also, okay? So little and great tradition, and then pure and impure theory, the popular theory given by Louis Dumont, right? In terms of historical, it could be, what we call, historical is mostly, what we call based on history. So we could have what we call a subaltern perspective. Subaltern perspective. We could have nationalist perspective, and so on. This we are not much interested in, okay? Anyway, I'm just writing it down for the understanding sake, that's it. When it comes to what we call field view, we have prominent one to start with is the structural functionalist. Okay? A structural functionalist. And you guys have to remind me that I have to make a distinction between a structural functionalist given by Parson and that given by Radcliffe Brown. And why the Radcliffe Brown is more applicable to Indian society. Okay? Just remind me. We have to discuss that. Then is the Marxist. Very interestingly, A.R. Desai is one of the pioneer among the Marxists to apply it, what we call in actual society. Okay? Marxist, even the Karl Marx himself never came up with what we call empirical data to support his hypothesis. What we call A.R. Desai is the one to do so. Okay? And then yes, of course, the modernist. For example, the Yogendra Singh and everyone. Okay? Modernist. Yogendra Singh, Gunnar Myrdal, and everyone. That will come in the third kind, that is the modernist, okay? To summarize, as I said, the sociology, Indian sociology could be understood from the book view and field view. In book view, there are prominent two, what we call schools, cultural and historical. In cultural, we have Indological, little and great tradition, pure and impure theory. In field view, we have structural functionalist. Popular guy is the M.N. Srinivas, and then what we call Marxist is the A.R. Desai, and modernist, as I said, is the Yogendra Singh, okay? Now we are going to move upon our, what we call, focus of the question, that is Indologist, okay? Please write down the definition of Indologist. Historical and comparative method, we are going to define, and that is going to be the introduction of our answer, okay? The definition of Indological. I hope everyone is following that. We are still in the intro, body, conclusion aspect itself. We are still following the same rule. In the introduction, we are going to define Indological perspective, and that is historical and comparative method. Historical and comparative method based on historical text. Based on historical text. Full stop. Indological perspective assumes that, after full stop, Indological perspective assumes that Indian society and culture, Indological perspective assumes that Indian society and culture is unique and can be grasped from historical text. ठीक है? Text में आप लोग, you will be just, making a distinction between what we call religious. What could be the various types of text through which we would be actually coming up with the Indological perspective? In that you could write the religious one, non-religious one, and so would be the case of government surveys, report, and the non-government one. So these are the various classification of resources that we are going to utilize to understand or which we are going to utilize in the historical and comparative method, okay? Again, I would like to, what you call, emphasize on the term historical and comparative method. As you could understand that, again, sociology is where, अगर आप लोग वो अगर first second chapter में जाओगे, paper 1 का, उसमें we try to understand that, what we call, जब हम लोग को data मिलती है, whenever we formulate a hypothesis, we go ahead and, what we call, get data based on such an hypothesis, we still go for the comparison method only, okay? Here the comparison method, so sociology, the standard way through which sociological method actually evolves, the same method we are going to use, only the sources is going to be specified, only the textual resources from the history. So that's why it is called historical and comparative method, okay? So that is something that we are going to write in the intro, and we are going to now move to the body part, okay? See, it's a 10 marker question, okay? But I am going to discuss most of the thing that G.S. Ghurye has said about Indian society, okay? So you would have what you call, it would be your prerogative which section you want to actually emphasize upon. Okay, since it is what we call a very important, he is a very important thinker, I am just going to discuss everything that he has said, okay? It's a 10 marker, so you have to curate it according to the question, okay? The first thing that he has said about when it comes to G.S. Ghurye, we can just write down. Again, that is something, again the curation is a part that you have to do, so I would suggest not to write this in the answer part. We are going to now just discuss G.S. Ghurye Indological perspective. What he has said on various institutions of society, okay? Again, my sources remain for paper 2 entirely. I have depended upon Sudhanshu Sharma's notes, okay? Something which you could easily find. I believe most of the time if I miss something, you could just see it from here, okay? When it comes to G.S. Ghurye, on India, what he has said. According to him, you could just write, India is surviving as a nation. India is surviving as a nation. India is surviving as a nation due to common value consensus. Due to common value consensus. Second thing that he has said about is about religious values. Religious values. According to Ghurye, religion in India, Egypt, were centered around temples. Were centered around temples. The role of gods, after full stop you could write, the role of gods is to integrate local level religion and practices, is to integrate local level religion or practices into macro level system of local level religion practices into macro level system of worship. Into macro level system of worship. Again, something that you could actually use in the paper 1 also, right? In paper 1 we have religion and we have studied various other thinkers. G.S. Ghurye is something that could be applicable there also, okay? That's why I believe, you should be able to appreciate the reason why I'm doing this exercise, only to equip you with multiple thinkers and multiple theories which you could utilize in various parts throughout the chapter, okay, throughout the paper 2. Right? Then the third thing that he has said, he has talked about the what we call priest or sadhu. Priest or sadhus. Priests or sadhus. He talked about the paradoxical nature. You could start here. He talks about the paradoxical nature of renunciation. Paradoxical nature of renunciation. In which they give up material possession, in which they give up material possession, and still provide patronage to, development of religious scriptures. So why this is paradox? Because on one hand they are going for, what we call renunciation. They are just renunciating all the material possession a person could have. However, on the other hand, they would still be going for some accumulation, right? Religious scripture is still a form of accumulation. So that's why it's a paradoxical nature, okay? The next thing that he's talked about is urbanization in India. Urbanization in India. So Ghurye would be talking from Indological perspective how urbanization in India has been. According to Ghurye, at least till 1980s, Urbanization in India, urbanization in India is not a simple function. Urbanization in India is not a simple function of industrial growth. Of industrial growth. After full stop, in India, the process of urbanization started from within. In India, the process of urbanization started from within. In India, the process of urbanization started from within the rural area itself. The rural area itself. The rural area itself. So basically what he is going to say, we are going to summarize it again, but I'm just going to give you an explanation. He says that suppose this is a rural area. Okay, and there is a section of, what we call part, which would be converted into a, what we call, let's say it would become a center of trade. Okay, as the trade would expand, as the trade goes expanding, it will, what we call, it will turn urbanization. Why? Because for supporting trade, you would need township, you would be requiring labor, you would be requiring, what we call, and so on. Matlab, everything that is required to support the trade in that very small region of rural areas would lead to, what we call, process of urbanization. Okay, I hope everyone is getting this point. Basically, he's saying that only to support the trade that was happening in a small part of the rural area, every, what we call, other institution which is required for an urban settlement would start developing, and henceforth this area of rural area would turn into urban area. Okay, right, in short. One part of big village was converted into market. One part of big village was converted into market, and in turn led to township, and in turn led to development of township, judicial and other institution. Next thing that Ghurye has talked about is the caste. You can write caste and kinship. Next thing that Ghurye has talked about is the caste and kinship. See, when it comes to Ghurye, the guy, he would be talking about the Varna more. Okay, he would be talking about caste in terms of Varna. When it comes to M.N. Srinivas, he would be talking about the actual, functioning of the caste, right? At ground level, what is actually what is happening, he would be talking about that. But since he is an Indological perspective, he is relying upon the historical text, and in historical text, more, what you call, talked about term is the Varna. More talked about the term, what we call, of origin of caste is Varna. Henceforth, what we call, G.S. Ghurye would be talking more in terms of Varna, and M.N. Srinivas, which we would be discussing later, he would be talking more in terms of caste. Okay, when it comes to kinship, he would be talking about the Gotra system. Okay, he would be talking about the Gotra system. We'd write down few short lines about both this thing. Just a second. Ghurye has described, you can write, Ghurye has described caste system. Ghurye has described caste system as Brahmanical system, and believes that The conquered non-Aryan race, the conquered non-Aryan race, the conquered non-Aryan race becomes Sudras, who were barred from, become Sudras, who were barred from religious and social activities, who were barred from religious and social activity. So according to Ghurye, Varna here would be meaning color, okay? Varna here means color. That is what some, see, Ghurye on caste is again a very, what we call, 6 जो उसका उसने बताया, 6 characteristic that we would be discussing in detail when we would be discussing the 3rd chapter, that is caste system, okay? So we would be leaving it here itself, okay? We would be moving to the, what he has said about the kinship, that is the Indian term for kinship, which is called as the Gotra. Ghurye, yes. You could just write that, yes, of course, even Ghurye is supporting the racial view of caste. Okay, so there is a theory. I will just give an explanation for this. Thank you, ma'am, for reminding me. There is someone called W.H. Rivers, I guess, right? Okay, so basically he talks that if this is what what we call India, okay, this is India. We would be discussing on various theories of caste anyway, but I'm just giving you. So basically he says that, okay, Aryans came. Okay, Aryan is a different race. Indigenous is a different race, okay? They would be having certain form of interaction, okay? And then what we call the entire caste system would get crystallized very soon due to such an interaction, okay? That interaction we would be talking in detail. I'm just giving you a brief description what W.H. Rivers has talked about and how it has affected the Ghurye's concept of caste, okay? So basically the racial interaction getting crystallized lead to the formation of caste system. Okay, and that rather than what we call Aryans or non-Aryans moving to different places, the culture has moved. Okay, the culture of caste system has moved to other places, and that's how the caste system became, and what we call it has spread to the entire India. Okay, popularly called as the diffusionist theory. When it comes to diffusionist theory in terms of spread of caste system. Okay. So that is a theory what W.H. Rivers has said, and it has been subscribed by Ghurye as well. Okay, please make a note of it and we'll move ahead. This is the diffusionist theory given by W.H. Rivers on caste system. That is the thing. We would be discussing multiple one. Okay, let the caste system start. Okay, then we would be discussing different thinkers for sure. Okay, we still have to cover the Gotra part. Please write it down, what we are going to write in this, the Gotra section. These categories were derived, the Gotra we are going to write is brief explanation of Gotra. These categories were derived from name of sages in the past. Name of sages in the past. They are real or fictional. They are the sages. We are still referring to the sages. They are real or fictional founder of the Gotra. They are real or fictional founder of the Gotra. Okay, so apart from, there is a kinship relationship which is, again, when you talk about the Gotra one, okay, see, kinship is based on two things, right? From paper one, I'm giving a reference. It is based on blood or marriage, right? Okay, this Gotra is similar to the blood one, right? So we still in India we have another form of kinship, that is the Charan one. It is based on having a single guru. Okay, so we are going to write about the Charan one also. Apart from what we call Gotra form of kinship, in India there exists a Charan form of kinship in which we draw what we call line from a single guru, single teacher होगा तो सब कोई एक ही चरण को belong करेंगे. I hope everyone is getting why I am trying to make this distinction. So please write it down. Apart from Gotra in India, apart from Gotra in India, we have Charan form of kinship as well. We have Charan form of kinship as well. Which is based on Charan form of kinship as well, which is based on Guru Sishya relationship. Which is based on Guru Sishya relationship. I hope when kinship system is asked, even in paper 1, we can bring this distinction, right? How we are distinct from India, and we, apart from having this two, what we call popular format, the blood and marriage, we have the third type of format as well. Okay? I hope this will actually enrich your paper 1 answer as well. Please, I will be making such correlation as more often as possible. Okay. The next thing that he has talked about is the caste. Oh, sorry, tribe. The sixth part is the tribe. What Ghurye has talked about in terms of tribe. A very famous term that Ghurye has talked about in terms of tribe is they are backward Hindus. Okay. So you could just write tribes are backward Hindu. They are imperfectly integrated. Tribes are backward Hindus. They are imperfectly integrated. Segment of Hindus. Imperfectly integrated segment of Hindus. Okay, and popularly, if everybody knows, then one of the thing through which what we call pronounced in terms of tribal, identity integration, he has asked for assimilation. Assimilation, everybody knows, in which they would be losing their identity and they would be adopting the Hinduism tenets. Okay, so he has what we call asked for assimilation. Since they are backward Hindus, what we call the way forward when it comes to tribal identity or tribal existence in India, it would be assimilation. The way forward for such a scenario is assimilation. And I hope everyone can elaborate the assimilation part. Then he has talked about the art and architecture in India. Art and architecture. According to Ghurye, you can just write. According to Ghurye, there exist common elements. According to Ghurye, there exist common elements in art and architecture. In art and architecture of Hindu. According to Ghurye, there exist common element in art and architecture of Hindu, Jain and Buddhist. Of Hindu, Jain and Buddhist. After full stop you can write. Muslims form a separate group. Muslims form a separate group. Muslims form a separate group, and there is little possibility of separate group, and there is a little possibility of give and take. So according to him, if we talk, there is no such thing as Indo-Islamic architecture. Okay, so according to him, Indo-Islamic architecture is non-existent. It is, since he just, what you call, just reject that there could be some form of give and take between Hindu architecture and the Muslim architecture. Okay, right on the last part on Hindu-Muslim tradition, Hindu-Muslim relationship, Hindu-Muslim relationship. Again, he does not actually believes in any form of, does not believes in any form of synthesis between the two religion. Any form of synthesis between the two religion. Okay, so this is in short what he has, G.S. Ghurye has talked about various elements of Indian society. Okay, we have just written, but we will go back to the question. We will try to mold how to write and what would be the good component of the answer that we have to take it. Okay, so as it says, write a note on the G.S. Ghurye Indological perspective in the understanding of the Indian society. Okay, so there are few prominent elements which you could actually take. Okay, out of this you would be noting down few prominent elements that you could actually go ahead and take. Okay, for example, this might be, what we call prominent elements such as India, the religious values, urbanization in India, caste and kinship, tribes. Okay, up to, let's say we are going to take this 4 or 5. It's your prerogative. Again, as I said, I've just talked about most of the thing that he has talked about. It's your prerogative which one you are going to choose. But we have to make the answer complete, right? So we have to write the critique as well. Okay, so next part that we are going to write is the critique of it. Please write it down. We are going to now discuss the critique of G.S. Ghurye Indologist School. And that would make the answer complete. If the question, see in this question it has talked about right Indological perspective. If it was right from critical perspective, then all this, what you call parts that we have discussed could be, what we call reduced into only definition of Indologist. Some popular instances of how he has applied Indologist school, and then we would have moved to the greater, we would have given greater importance to the critique part. Okay, so now we are going to discuss the critique of Indologist. Critique. I request you guys to also to help me in coming up with critique. Okay, the first one was given by S.C. Dubey, right? He was one of the popular critique. So basically he says, S.C. Dubey is saying that Indian culture is not equal to Hinduism. And that too not equal to what we call Brahmanical tradition. So he has given a figure that Brahmins, the community would be forming around less than 15% of the population. Less than 15% of the population. Okay. So we cannot actually say that this tradition, the tradition that was written in the text, more what we call emphasizes on the Brahmanical way of life, cannot be used to explain the entire Indian culture. Okay, that is the first critique given by S.C. Dubey. Then we have the Berryman or something. It's G.D. Berryman, I believe, but I usually go with the last name only. See, according to him, Indologists are what you call, rejecting the fact that people also have their own will. People will is rejected. Okay, people will is rejected. Basically, the text of Indologist, the ancient text, is talking more about what ought to be, right? the text, the ancient text, Manusmriti or any, what you call text that you would be taking, it would be more talking in lines of what ought to be and not the actual happening. Right? There could be distinction. Even the Brahmins community, even if it is a Brahminical text, even they might not be following it to the truest form. So that is what he is going to say, that people will, when it comes to own will, own decision making, when it comes to Indologists school, they have been not followed. So that is what J.D. Berman has said. So these are the what we call popular one. But I believe we already know about the other critique also. How we would be coming up with? Of course, we can always write the A.R. Desai one. Why? Because A.R. Desai would say, he's a Marxist. So he would say that this, notion, this construction of culture based on ancient text is false. Culture is, what you call tradition, could be understood from the economic order at that time of the society. Okay? I hope everyone can explain. A.R. Desai, how you would be saying that this construction of culture, this construct of culture, please write it down, this construct of culture based on ancient text is false. Based on ancient text is false. Culture is the product of, culture or tradition is the product of economic order. Culture or tradition is the product of economic order prevailing at that time. We can even write from M.N. Srinivas' perspective that it is the field studies. Field studies is required. Matlab field studies is required to capture the essence of Indian culture. We cannot rely on text alone. Field study is required to capture the essence of, field studies is required to capture the essence of Indian culture. We can even talk about the feminist one. What feminist perspective would say as a critique? Again, if you could just remember, I am doing the same thing that we were doing last time also. These two are the popular one which would be written in your notes. But we will be moving ahead and you would be utilizing our own idea to give a good critique. And this, what we call answer would become more useful when we are going to, when it is asked, write a critical note on the Indological perspective. In that, if you're writing all this thing and explaining it really well, you are bound to score high. Okay. When it comes to feminist perspective, I have to say, again, ancient history, we have read in ancient history that two sections of people were not allowed to study the Sanskrit text. Or they were, our Kalidas jo hai, when it is a very, popular what we call instance quoted from Kalidas. Whenever people, Kalidas, any drama he has written, when people were talking, normal people, common people were talking, they would be talking in Sanskrit. When what we call Sudras and women would be talking, they would be talking in the Pali language. Perfect, right? So that is the popular thing taken from Kalidasa drama. Okay? So all other people would be talking in Sanskrit. The common one would be talking in Sanskrit. They would be talking in Pali. So that actually shows that language, using language, an entire section of people, specifically women, have been removed from the narrative. Okay? You could write that due to language, Sanskrit was a popular language when it comes to logical text, and due to this language, the narrative of woman, the narrative from the perspective of woman is missing. Sanskrit is a popular language when it comes to ancient text, and due to this, the narrative from woman perspective is, the narratives from woman perspective is missing. Yes, we could even go ahead. We could actually write. Yeah, please write it down. That in ancient text, further, you could just start by writing. Further in Indian text, rights have been, further in Indian text, ancient text, rights have been given to men. Rights have been given to men and duties were given to women. And duties were given to women. Any other critique that you guys could think of? I didn't went with the cure one because I think it was just irrelevant here, at least. At that point of time, it was totally irrelevant. Even उस समय तक the cure theory शुरू भी नहीं हुई थी. So I felt that we should actually eliminate it. Otherwise, I would have gone with my usual, what we call construct, in which if one school is there, we would be critiquing it using multiple other school. Any other thing that I am missing? Can anyone say? Sorry? Yeah, subaltern perspective. Yes, we could write. Please write down the next one. Subaltern perspective. Subaltern perspective. So from subaltern perspective, they would actually talk about that. Most of the ancient text talk from the perspective of rulers, or people who have greater amount of rights in society. It actually just what we call ignores the perspective of the common people. That is a basic definition of subaltern. That is what I am saying. That since it is subaltern perspective, it is totally missing in the ancient Indian text. Yes.
Can we say that today's ideology is highly influenced by colonial construction of our society?
So he was actually acting as a reaction to it, right? That is the entire thing. Is that the debate? Can you elaborate?
I mean, the focus given to caste
Mm-hmm.
in terms of when the census and all started.
Mm-hmm.
So his reaction to that is, I mean, it has given a biasness to him to go back to traditional texts and all. He is ignoring the contemporary realities of society.
Okay, yeah, it could be actually. That is where, I actually was thinking of covering this very small debate of sociology for India and sociology of India. Okay. So there has been always a debate between sociology for India and sociology of India. When it comes to the for India, they would be having that, okay, the Western, what we call Western thinkers or Western philosophy could be applied in India as well. For sociology of India, it is unique. Our concept that would be forming would be pretty much unique. So that is a two-way. And basically what I'm trying to understand from what sir has told, what my friend has told just now, is that he's saying that, one of the reason that, what we call Ghurye was so much obsessed with Varna form of caste is because of the, what we call colonial, what we call administration being too much focused upon the actual notion of caste. So caste census and everything was, what we call, actually he said, that, what he was saying is that why the society is disintegrating, or why the society is, what we call, there is a friction or fracture in the society, is because we are going for a scramble of privileges. It's a term that he has used, a scramble of privilege. Okay? So he's seeing that when the caste census is what we call being undertaken, people from different caste would be enrolling themselves as, what we call some certain caste, only to get the benefits out of it. A scramble for privilege. Whenever that is happening, he is trying to emphasize on the what romanticism hai unke, what we call a very good obsession and adherence to the Varna form of caste is shown only because the scramble for privilege was seen at that time. Okay, scramble for privilege, everyone can write that since a scramble for privilege is something that he actually thought might be leading to the disintegration or might be leading to the fracture in the society, he was more obsessed with the Varna form of caste. And according to him, Varna is pretty much functional, okay? Varna form of caste is pretty much functional. He has never talked about removing the caste system. And that is one of the reason he even asks about assimilation of tribes into also the Hinduism, okay? Because he considered they are impartially or they are what we call still not Hinduized properly, okay? I hope everyone is getting this discussion. Okay. What would you be writing this in conclusion में क्या लिखोगे इसका फिर? See, we could actually just write that, yes, of course, we could just write that Indological perspective, a dialogue between, or what we call a exchange, give and take between Indological perspective and other perspective, which we have written in the critique, would make the entire Indian society, what we call Indian society more understandable. Okay, we are just going to write that each perspective is required to understand the society better. Okay, that could be a good conclusion to end with. Write down the next question that we are going to discuss. The question is analyze A.R. Desai. Next question is analyze A.R. Desai. Analyze A.R. Desai. Views on India's path of development. India's path of development. The question is analyze A.R. Desai views on India's path of development. India's path of development. Okay. So that is the question. So if you just could think of, you would be going with a similar of intro, body and conclusion. Okay. Since it is an analyze part, we do need, before ending, we do need some of the critique of his study. A.R. Desai, the primarily part would be the A.R. Desai, what he has talked about in terms of development. Okay. What he has talked about in terms of development. Critique would form the smaller part and then we would be moving to the conclusion. So that would be the basic broad structure of the question. It is a 10 marker, so you would be getting 2 pages. So you must be having some mind framework how we are going to place it at different places. Okay. So we'll start with the introduction in which we would be writing about A.R. Desai works. We could just write that how he has applied Marxist in Indian society. Pretty simple. You could just go ahead and say that A.R. Desai was a Marxist and he has applied. A.R. Desai was a Marxist and has utilized Marx theory of mode of production. Marx theory of mode of production. Marx theory of mode of production to understand change in Indian society. Okay, so there is a popular, what we call definition of development. Development is growth plus social change. Okay, that is the UN definition of. I'm just noting it down. Why? Because I use the term change. Okay, so the question is based on development, so you could just write that growth is equal to, development can be defined as growth plus social change as given by the United Nations. See, in this question, I always call all this kind of question as a trigger. It is asking you to analyze the path of development by A.R. Desai. Whenever term like path, whenever term like time period is used, All this thing timeline, then I believe, a good timeline diagram should be made in the body. That should be a trigger for you to make a visual. Okay, I hope everyone is getting the trigger. So I believe that should trigger you. So I've made a very rough diagram. I would, request you guys to actually elaborate it in your home. I started with 1800, and then I've moved to what we call 1950, and then I've moved to today's, let's say, 2010. Up to this period, we have the feudalism. See, I would be discussing it in more details when it comes to the A.R. Desai idea of nationalism. Okay? But I'm just giving you a rough idea that according to him, before British, occupation, colonial occupation, it was feudalistic British society. They brought capitalism in India, and that led to the nationalism, development of nationalism. Somewhere in 1900, let's say, the nationalism is getting triggered, and then we are getting independent, and then we are going for socialist pattern of development. Pattern of development. Then in 1990, we are going for the LPG reform. So that is the entire timeline diagram of various what we call development that we could actually comment about from A.R. Desai perspective. Okay. See, once this timeline diagram has been made, I believe most of the thing that we are going to write pretty much becomes clear. Okay. So basically, you could just write. You could start from what we call with the introduction, with the coming of colonial occupation. I'm going to say things in points, but you have to write this in paragraph. Okay. Write on the first point in this. With the coming of colonial rule. With the coming of colonial rule. And it has to be written in paragraph, I am just saying again, in actual answer, okay? With the coming of colonial rule, the feudal form of economy, the feudal form of economy, the feudal form of economy was transformed into capitalist economy, was transformed into capitalist economy. Leading to the development of nationalism. Leading to the development of nationalism. See, in actual theory that we would be discussing, there are 5 stages of development of nationalism. We will be discussing that in details, okay? When it comes to A.R. Desai work on development of the social, कुछ है ना उसका क्या social background of nationalism, ठीक है? वो उसमें हम लोग discuss करेंगे anyways, ठीक है? So when it comes to what we call after independence, right on the second point. We have to elaborate, okay? You guys would be elaborating it more. After independence, the government adopted socialist pattern of development. Socialist pattern of development. Okay, that is where A.R. Desai would start talking, okay? According to A.R. Desai, you could just write, according to A.R. Desai, socialist pattern of development, according to A.R. Desai, the Constitution of India, he would start from the Constitution itself, okay? The Constitution of India is a tool of domination, by the bourgeoisie, जो popular बोलते हैं ना, something on that line. The bourgeoisie, okay? The bourgeoisie or the capitalist class. The constitution is a tool of domination in the hand of bourgeoisie or capitalist class. And the slogan of socialistic pattern, is a hoax. And the slogan of socialistic pattern is a hoax. Okay, so one more thing that he has actually said, I would just first elaborate it so that it is easy for you guys to note it down. In terms of pattern of development, okay, it actually talks about, you know, how, what we call again, the paradoxical nature of development that is going to be. So I'm just going to say, it will be third point. So he's going to say that a section of bourgeoisie, okay, so they have, you know, what we call control over large mass. What they would be doing is that, apart from, of course, the constitution, the state, education, even they would be using tradition and rituals to, what we call, exercise control over the masses. Okay, so that is what he is going to say, that okay, so bourgeoisie would be, you know what, they would be talking about capitalist form of development. They would be talking about equality. They would be talking about that, okay, free movement of labor would be there. They would be talking about everything that is required in the modern capitalist society. At the same time, they would be using traditionalism and rituals to exercise control over the, what we call, other mass, like the common man masses, okay. So that is a paradoxical nature of development. Again, one of the paradox that is can be seen in the nature of development. You could just note it down that the bourgeoisie would be exercising control over the common people through the instrument of state, education, constitution, tradition and rituals as well. Constitution, tradition and rituals as well, which showcase the paradox nature of capitalism adopted in India. Okay, so we could just write down the fourth point, I believe, now. Planning measures. The planning commission I'm actually just referring to. The planning measures, 12 5-year plan tak tha na hum log ka. The planning measures helped in protecting and promoting class interest. The planning measures helped in protecting and promoting the class interest. You could write the fifth point. Here we would be talking about the poverty, the existing poverty, problems of slum and displacement, the existing poverty, problems of slums and displacement, are examples which showcase that the socialist pattern of development is not followed in letter and spirit. Okay, so AR Desai was more popular till this time, okay? More popular till this time. Slums and urbanization, whatever is happening. But we would go ahead. Why? Because we have to understand from the Marxist perspective only. And this is the point where, you know, what we call tech started coming up. Okay? अगर कल का न्यूज़पेपर आप लोग ने देखा था, बहुत वंडरफुल फिगर दिया हुआ था, पहला जो इकोनॉमी पेज में एक बहुत अच्छा फिगर दिया हुआ था कि 6% जो 90% जॉब जो स्किल है, स्किल जॉब है, ओनली 6% पॉपुलेशन स्किल्ड है उसके लिए, राइट? तो आउट ऑफ 100 6 पीपल, आउट ऑफ 100 जॉब 90 जॉब्स आर फॉर स्किल, आउट ऑफ 100 6 पीपल आर ओनली skilled. So you could see the skill gap. Okay, so such an instance could be quoted for this part where automation is coming up, you know, skill, new edge skill is being required, but since state is not taking care of the skill gap, people are still in this poverty, slums and वो जो problem है वो अभी भी चल रहा है. I hope everyone is getting how it would be going ahead for this part. We would be using the Marxist idea only, and we would be talking about how automation is still perpetuating the poverty and slum and all those displacement problem. Okay, for this part, can everyone do that? Any other thing that we should be adding from Marxist perspective? Poverty reduction हुआ है, that's true. You know, there is a popular thing called, you know, what you call poverty has not been what we call reduced, poverty has just moved from rural to urban area and then back. There is a cycle of poverty also, and that is again said by A.R. Desai only. Okay, so A.R. Desai, according to A.R. Desai, poverty is not decreasing, it is just moving from rural to urban area and then it is going back to rural areas. Basically he says that a poor person, he would be participating in some poverty, you know, koi job opportunity, he would be getting some opportunity in urban areas. As he goes there, he would be feeling that he has been removed from the poverty, okay, and then when he actually is out of the job due to his ill health or whatever, you know, at the end of his tenure, he would be going back and then poverty would still be there. So that is again told by A.R. Desai only. Okay, so that's something again you could actually write it down, how A.R. Desai has talked about migration of poverty from rural to urban areas and back to urban areas, rural areas, rather than poverty alleviation. Okay, it's a good point. Everybody knows that it has happened. Poverty 58% something say 22.4% the, yeah, that is true. But we have to still talk about the A.R. Desai perspective. That's why I am coming with such an explanation of the poverty alleviation. Okay, everyone is getting? So that is something that we could write for the this part and the automation as well. Okay, this wonderful, when I was, अगर आप लोग ने देखा हो, मैं newspaper का एक session किया था. I did a session on how to study newspaper. Okay, so I used to study newspaper in an hour itself. So I was just doing that. This article is pretty big, very big article it is. I believe half page से ज़्यादा economy का है. But I think only thing that was important in that article was that 6% and 9%, जो कि summary में लिखा हुआ था. Topic था जो like वो नो the topic जो एकदम bold में लिखा रहता है, उसके नीचे एक line का summary होता है. Every editorial has also the same thing. They would have a big, and then, for example, yesterday editorial was someone geopolitics, वो उसका आता है. M.K. Narayan, the governor of West Bengal का आया हुआ था, ठीक है. तो interestingly कल मैं ऐसे ही article देख रहा था, ठीक है. तो क्या हुआ कि M.K. Narayan is a national security advisor, ठीक है. So he was so basically I was going through. So अगर आपने देखा होगा पहले तो वो एक bold में editorial का heading होगा. Then there was a one-liner explanation of it in which it was written geopolitical and economic changes in those things. Right? If you had seen the article, it again, you know, so you might have noticed that geopolitics was covered in 4/5 of the article, economics was covered in 1/5 of the article. So he was a national security advisor, so you guys could understand the bent of him towards geopolitics more. Okay, and again, and that is what I say, you know, I would just give you a hint on this newspaper thing. Okay, so basically what I say is, suppose there is an IR. Okay, country 1 and country 2 is interacting. Okay, so geopolitics would be one front. So would be the form of economy, then culture, okay, and then so on. Basically there would be around, let's say, 6th front in which we are what we call interacting with the other country. Okay, I repeatedly say na ki question doesn't come from one article. Question would never come from one article. Okay, so we should try to understand how much that article is important. To understand this, I do a very simple exercise. See, If geopolitics and economics is being discussed in that article, that means something that is discussed is 2 by 6th. Right? In an entire question of geopolitics or two countries interaction, or what we call set of countries interacting with other countries, if there are 6 fronts, only 2 fronts has been discussed. So I believe that article is 1/3 of a good answer. 1/3 of a good answer is 250 words मान लो answer है, so it should be somewhere around 80 words. So that 2000 words article should be reduced to a note of only 80 words. I hope everyone is getting why I did this exercise. So that should be that should force you to actually come up with very small and crisp notes of any editorial. Okay. So try to use all this small formula. Actually, that would help you to understand. Once you have this bent of mind, no, this article is not going to be the end and means of all, you'll become very skeptical also of the article. You'd not be taking everything very easily, and you'd be very much, what we call vigilant, very much active in terms of consuming only those important words that needs to be taken care of. Okay. So that actually helps you reduce the article, what you call whatever of size to very less number of in terms of notes. Okay. So anyway, so that is something, most of the thing that he has talked about when it came to A.R. Desai in terms of development. Okay. So we have covered from 1800 to the 2010, and I believe that is a good time scale to cover. It's a 10 markers. Please elaborate also. For example, we have written in points. I would suggest you write in paragraphs and elaborate those points. Okay. If you could come up with instances of such time. Okay. But we have to write down the critique. So we'll start from the popular critique of A.R. Desai, and he is Yogendra Singh. Okay. According to Yogendra Singh, A.R. Desai, कोई problem है क्या मैम? अच्छा. According to A.R. Desai, according to Yogendra Singh, A.R. Desai study fails at empirical support. That is, fails at empirical support. That is, it can be challenged by substantial data. See, again, we have to go ahead. We have learned so many school, we need to apply it, okay? So we have this new Marxist school to actually just write that it is by consent and coercion. A mix of consent and coercion is how state would go ahead in terms of any development policy also, okay? So new Marxist you can utilize. I believe I've explained this consent and coercion in the earlier classes, right? So when it comes to Marxists, they would say it is only by coercion. Neo-Marxists would say there is an element of consent as well. Since it is existing, we cannot exactly stick to the A.R. Desai view of development being only for the bourgeoisie one. It might be through the consent of the common people as well. Okay? Any other? I believe we can write multiple perspective here. The functionalist perspective as well we could write. Since it is a conflict school, we can always write the functional perspective. In which, yes, of course, Anand, you have said that the poverty alleviation thing, right? It's a popular example that the development program has led to removal of poverty. Okay? Functional perspective as well can be quoted. And then, yes, of course, the fact that poverty alleviation has been done, right? Exactly, yes. The popular criticism of Marxist after functional school would be too much emphasis on the economic structure. and ignoring the culture, tradition, etc. Culture, tradition, etc. Anything else that we should be writing in terms of critique? See, anyway, the critique, as I said, would be, you know, a very short space, right? Only structure of एक बार दिमाग में आपका आ जाएगा कि 2 पेज में कितना जगह लिखना है ना, वो सब mark. Once you have marked their paper in terms of how you would be utilizing a space, I believe most of, you know, what we call organization of answer is done. Again, remember the weightage thing that we used to do, right? We haven't come across yet to the question which have multiple parts. Otherwise, we would be doing that weightage thing as well. Write down the next question. Write a critique of the question is, third question, write a critique of the structural functional perspective. Write a critique of the structural functional perspective used by M.N. Srinivas. Used by M.N. Srinivas in the understanding of, used by M.N. Srinivas in the understanding of Indian society. Understanding of Indian society. Okay. So now we are going to see, I would again, you know, try to give you guys a recollection of what we have already learned in structural functionalism. We studied this in paper 1. If you guys can recollect, how did we study this? We started with the Spencer structural functionalism. Everybody remember that when Spencer is talking about structural functionalism, it is a philosophy. We move ahead with the Parson, in which he considered it as a method, right? For him it is a philosophy. For him it is a method. And then today we would be discussing how it is distinct from A.R. Radcliffe Brown, who actually what we call influenced a study done by M.N. Srinivas. Okay? It is also a probable question, okay? People might ask you a question that distinguish between Parson structural functionalism and A.R. Radcliffe Brown structural functionalism. This could be a probable question as well. So that's why we are going to understand this. I believe you could anyway, anyone who has attended the earlier class would be able to understand this. Today we are going to do this one, okay? So you could just write difference between Parson and Brown. Parson, we are just going to now differentiate between Parson and Brown in terms of structure functionalism, okay? The first, you know, what you call, okay, so I'm just going to bit first elaborate it on Blackboard, then we will be just writing the difference. That would be a more better way to discuss this. See, if you remember that we were talking about when we were talking about Parson, we had this 4 type of social system. Okay? 4 type of social system. The type of social system is going to determine the individual action. Okay. In this case, individual or institution, if it is, they would be determining the type of social system. It is just alter. I hope everyone is able to understand this. See, in this, just a positivist school, there is a society, it will be controlling everything here, inside it. Parson, when he has come up with this idea, at the end, he would be talking when it is cultural system, social system, personality system, and organizational system. So when he talks about cultural system, he would be already defining what kind of individual action is there. I hope everyone remember for culture, it was instrumental action. Right? Everyone remembers that we did one exercise, a complete exercise, right? So, in Parson, it is clearly defined that if there is a specific kind of social system, what kind of individual action is anticipated. Okay? In case of Brown, it is the opposite. What kind of individual action would be leading to what kind of social system is the way of Brown. Okay? So basically, you see why Brown became more applicable to India, because in India we find this thing, caste, individual, their approaches, their orientation are already changing. They are always changing. Like caste is not rigid, right? If suppose, caste is a cultural system. Suppose, in cultural system, we have something called caste. If we are trying to use Parson, I'm just giving an example, which actually doesn't exist, but I'm just trying to elaborate, okay? Suppose through Parson, we are going to understand Indian society, and in that cultural system is a caste system. So in that, individual won't have much of an independency. Right? Individual would be doing things which are determined by the rigid form of caste. But that is not the case in terms of Brown or what we call M.N. Srinivas as well, right? You guys must seen M.N. Srinivas talks about this Sanskritization, right? In which caste structure which was assumed to be rigid, even the village which was assumed to be rigid, everything that would be rigid here would suddenly become very flexible. And then you would be able to capture the reality of Indian society. Okay, I hope everyone is getting why M.N. Srinivas went for Brown form of structural functionalism and not Parson. Okay, so that is the prime difference between them. We will just write down on point, write down the first difference. System maintains, in the Parson side we are going to write, system maintains and adjusts itself. System maintains and adjusts itself, not depending upon the institution or individual. Not depending upon the institution or individual. In this, you are going to write the first point in Brown, that is institution function. Institution function on the Brown side. Institution function is to maintain society as a system. Is to maintain institution function, is to maintain society as a system. Society as a system. Second difference, write down on the Parson side, concerned with particular arrangement of interrelated institution, concerned with particular arrangement of interrelated institution, as well as roles which each person which each person assumes in the group. Assumes in the group. On the Brown side, you could write concerned with existing relation at a given time, that link together certain human being. Okay, so one of the question I believe in previous year it has been already asked that why Brown structural functionalism was used. Okay, we have already explained, so I'm going to give you some summary line, 2 lines only, in which you would be summarizing why Brown was more what we call applicable, more relevant to the Indian society when it comes to structural functionalism. Write it down. Brown does not look at a structure. Brown, just write it down after this reference table. Brown does not look at a structure as an institution, but a product of rules, not as an institution, but as a product of rules which keep changing, After full stop, write it down. India is not exactly traditional. After full stop, India is not exactly traditional, where every structure is linked, to every other structure, or modern, where structures are clearly defined. The structures are clearly defined. Hence, British sociology of Brown, and not American sociology of Parson, has been used by M.N. Srinivas. See, you could give just an example of this caste as well. Okay, caste is a very wonderful example through which you could actually, emphasize that how Parson was trying to, what we call, if Parson we were applying, how, it has, what we call, it would have been going by explaining the society, and how Radcliffe Brown is bringing the change. Okay. Anyway, we are still yet to even start the question that has been asked. I'm just going through the background of structural functionalism and how M.N. Srinivas has utilized. M.N. Srinivas studied from which university? He studied, कहाँ का वो पढ़ाई किया, कहाँ से उसने, वो पूछ रहा हूँ. Okay, now we are going to discuss in brief what are the prominent, what we call, the prominent conclusion. Just like we study the conclusion that Gurrier, what we call, did for various institutions, India, caste, tribe, and everything. So on similar note, we are going to do the same exercise for Srinivas. And again, I'm just going to give you, what we call, an idea that the question was on critique, right? So that is not going to be the primary part of our answer. That would form very small. After integration in the body, very small, critique would form the major part. Okay, but still, since we have to discuss a thing entirely, we are going to discuss what M.N. Srinivas has talked about various institutions from a structural functionalist school. To start with village, what he has talked about in terms of village. Write it down. Srinivas contested colonial notion of Indian village, colonial notion of Indian village being completely self-sufficient. Colonial notion of Indian village being completely self-sufficient. Who gave the idea of village republic? Metcalfe, right? Okay, so that is the notion that he was trying to deconstruct. He argued village was always a part of wider entity. He argued village was always a part of wider entity. Okay, village was always a part of work. Again, I am going to give you one very small concept that he has given, that rather than a geographical space, village is a social space. Okay, village, if we consider the very idea of village being self-sufficient republic, means it has clear boundary with limited interaction at the end of the boundary, right? That is a popular notion given by Metcalfe. If we consider village as a self-sufficient republic, it is a geographical space with boundaries and limited interaction at the boundaries, right? But he considered village as a social space. Social space would be where multiple villages would be just interacting. They might be coming at interaction due to various events. It becomes social space because people are interacting. They are not limited by boundaries. And prominent forms of such interaction would be marriage, fair, market, etc. Okay? I hope everyone is getting this geographical space versus social space concept. So that was given by Srinivas to contradict the colonial notion that it is not a self-sufficient republic. Please, in your own words, just write it down. We'll move ahead with the sorry. AR Desai is also saying the same thing, I believe. Because it's economy based, na, so it's. I have to just check, madam. Actually, I don't know. But I will just clarify that later, okay? Just remind me once. Anyway, so in terms of, village, he has also talked about the caste fluidity. So basically, he gives an example that in the village Coorg where he studied, I believe everybody knows that his popular work is called The Remembered Village. And why it is called The Remembered Village? Because his work, first of all, got burned in a fire. So that's why The Remembered Village, okay? Still the one of the most popular school that we study or might be studying forever in sociology. Anyway, so in Coorg, he actually talks about that there is a village pawn. Okay, the government authorities are coming for any case, maybe, changing the, operation of this. And what you call the caste, across the caste, people unite to save that pawn. So basically he says that in terms of, caste, when it comes to village, has vertical and horizontal solidarity is manifested. Horizontal solidarity is manifested. Okay? I'll just explain what is vertical solidarity and what is horizontal solidarity. Okay. See, horizontal solidarity is when people from different castes is coming. Okay, they are considered as the same and they would be protecting the pond. When it comes to vertical solidarity, that is when one village, caste of one village, caste of two, second caste of second village would just come together. That is different, see, in single village, there would be horizontal solidarity across caste. Vertical solidarity would be in multiple villages.
Across the village, same caste would be the horizontal across the villages.
Just a second, okay, I'll just check. Should it be vertical solidarity according to you?
In the same village, if all the castes, higher and lower, are uniting them.
Just a second, let me check it once, okay. Is that vertical? Are you sure? Okay, yes, that's true. Yes. So this, we have to just change it, okay. When, what we call suppose there is caste 1 in village 1, the same caste in village 2, same caste in village 3. Multiple villages, same caste, this is the example of horizontal solidarity. Okay. And when it is what we call multiple caste in same village, that is the vertical solidarity, and that vertical solidarity we are talking about in this case, in which he has given the instance also, in which people are, what we call giving up their caste identity and uniting in the name of village to protect that pond. I hope everyone is clear with village solidarity, vertical and horizontal solidarity in caste system as studied by Srinivas. Thank you. Okay, so then after that his popular work, everybody knows that this 3 of his popular work is Sanskritization, Westernization, and dominant caste की class था क्या है? So these are his 3 popular works, okay. And as I said, we are now focusing on the critique, and this thing I would be focusing in the caste. जब caste system पढ़ेंगे अपन, तो then I would be elaborating it, okay. So we would be just, as I said, that is something you could just write after 1. This is the second his popular work, third is popular work, and fourth is popular work. To give us instances of the popular work where he has utilized the idea of structural functionalism. Okay, how you would be writing it in your answer? You would be of course you would be introducing with the structural functionalism in a school, a definition, any one you could actually go ahead with. Then you would be giving the instances of Srinivas applying that as structural functionalism, starting with village, moving to this in very short. Okay, just 1 line or even that is not required, and then we are moving to the popular part, that is the critique. Okay, all these things are not, I'm not going to leave it, we are going to discuss it in very detail. The question is more focused on the critique part, so we would be more trying to, again it's a 10 marker, so greater diversity that you are going to bring in the critique part is going to add to your answer. Okay, the more focused you are in your answer writing, especially in 10 markers, you are bound to get more marks. Okay, write down the first critique of structural functionalism. And that is specific to data collection. Specific to data collection. See, during data collection, it is popularly known that he avoided the lower caste, what we call resident, right? He didn't went to such a locality, he approached it through the village headman. So in terms of direct collection of data, it was absent, right? A village headman might be saying something that is not true to the extent. So that is the first critique that is said in this work, and that is specific to the data collection method that he applied. Specific to the data collection method he applied while studying the lower caste settlement in which he relied on the information of village headman, village headman. Second and popular direct critique of his has been Yogendra Singh. So according to Yogendra Singh, most of the studies that has been done by what you call Srinivas has been at micro level, and henceforth macro level generalization cannot be made on that. Okay. So if he says that Sanskritization has some concept in Coorg village, it cannot be generalized to the other parts of the country. Okay. But since Srinivas is going ahead and making it Sanskritization as properly as a concept, so that is why it is challenged by Yogendra Singh. Study is at macro level, therefore generalization at study is at micro level, so generalization as at macro level cannot be done. Study is at micro level, so generalization at macro level could not be done. See, when it comes to what we call caste, okay, you just have to actually elaborate that according to Srinivas, caste was the way of life. A person way of life, it is pure, he would be upper caste, it is impure, it would be lower caste. And both pure and impure is also again relative. See, I'm just going to explain the third critique that I'm going to write. What I'm trying to say is that caste is based on the way of life. Way of life is pure or impure. Pure means upper caste, impure means lower caste. Again, pure and impure is also relative. How does he give this example? He says that in this village in Mysore, those who were the traders who were veg, and the what we call peasants who were non-vegetarian. They used to go for non-vegetarian, which is considered impure in other area. These people were at higher hierarchy. They were at higher hierarchy. So that is what he is saying, that the idea of pure and impure is also relative. Okay? And since it is considered from the way of life which has what we call rituals and everything, the guy from Marxist would say that this is not correct. Ritual tradition pe wo believe nahi karte. They would say everything should be explained in terms of economic order. I'm just trying to come up with something to write more. I hope everyone is getting. I'm coming with a statement of caste. You could just start here. Caste according to Srinivas. Caste according to Srinivas is related to the caste according to Srinivas is related to the way of life which could be pure and impure, the idea, after few stuff you could write, the idea of pure and impure depends upon the reason. Okay. So example, if you want, you could just write down that trader one, who were vegetarian, were placed at a lower hierarchy than the peasants who were the non-vegetarian. Again, okay, that I would say later. It's something that is more related to S.C. Dubey. But anyway. Yes, that was the case. That is what I'm saying, na? Ki in some other place, pure is more, the vegetarian would be pure. Right? So they would be the higher hierarchy. But in this village where he studied, they were at the lower hierarchy, which is showcasing the relative nature of pure and impure. ठीक है? तो ये आपका लुई डिमोंड का भी क्रिटिक हो सकता है. लुई डिमोंड का प्योर एंड इम्प्योर पूरा परफेक्ट होता है. देयर इज नो रिलेटिविटी. बट Srinivas would be going for relativity. Right? Yeah. Yes, basically they are the land holding. I actually didn't want to say just to mix up with things. Otherwise, basically they were the peasants were the land holding. So that's why they were at the higher. Okay? I was just holding it because S.C. Dubey has come up with what multiple regions. You know, S.C. Dubey, जैसे कि S.C. Dubey जब बताते हैं, S.C. Dubey would be talking about status. ठीक है? So if we are talking about a closed society, status was determined by caste only. But according to the study done by S.C. Dubey, it has multiple things. You know, it even includes government jobs, ठीक है? Individual knowledgeable person, ठीक है? Power, okay? And even holding agriculture land. He has come up with 6 different things which, you know, determines the status. Yes. So that's why I was just, you know, removing it to make the discussion bit less, you know, streamlined. That's why I was. Otherwise, that is the entire explanation how this things comes with relative and how we can relate it with multiple thinkers. I hope everyone should be able to make such kind of analysis on their own. Okay, such kind of connection. So Marxist, you could just, once I've written the relative part and then you could write Marxist thinkers would contradict. Marxist thinker would contradict such a characterization of caste. And narrow down its basis only on economic order. And narrow down its basis only on economic order. When it comes to Ghurye, he would not be agreeing the scramble of privileges thing that you could easily write. Ghurye, he would be not exactly agreeing with the scramble of privileges that is going on due to westernization and Sanskritization. Ghurye line pe bhi, I believe one can elaborate, right? How Ghurye would be disagreeing with M.N. Srinivas' view of caste. Or M.N. Srinivas' entire view of the, what we call, various institutions of society he has studied. The feminist perspective we have to write at the end. See, in feminist perspective, there is a popular one called as the Uma Chakravarti, okay? So here Uma Chakravarti has said, and this is something that could be even a critique to the village study. See, what Srinivas did is a popular village study, okay? So Uma Chakravarti has written the critique of village study, that if a woman is coming out and woman is going for such kind of a study, it is still considered as something unnatural. So the woman perspective is missing in the village study. That is the entire critique of Uma Chakravarti on village study, which can be written in the feminist perspective. I hope everyone is getting how I am utilizing this thinker into the, what we call, critique of Srinivas, because anyway Srinivas went ahead with the village study only. You could just write Uma Chakravarti as stated by Uma Chakravarti in village study. In village study, female narrative is missing. Female gender narrative is missing. Female gender narrative is missing. Because female scholar participating in such a research, female gender narrative is missing. Because female scholar participating in such research, female scholar participating in such research would be considered as unnatural. Can we add anything else? Are we missing something? Yes, yes, yes. Yes. We can write the sixth part, and that is the subaltern part, we could just say. See, I'm going to explain one of the, again, the Sanskritization part, okay. I'm going to give you a critique of Sanskritization, and let's see if we could actually bring it in this discussion or not. Okay. So we have caste, we have class, and we have power. These are the popular three ways of stratification through which we study the stratification. Okay. So now we are going to only study the stratification part. Okay. Stratification as given by Srinivas, and its critique given by Harold A. Gould. Something on that line, koi hai thinker. ठीक है? Please check the spelling. What he says, Srinivas is saying that it is just mimicking the upper caste ideology or way of life. Upper caste ideology or way of life. Okay, this is what Srinivas is going to say. Harold Gould say that this is not mimicking. This is a protest. Okay? Protest under a camouflage. The protest, basically it is saying it is a protest under a camouflage. That is what Harold A. Gould is going to say, that it is a protest under a camouflage. Why it is a protest under a camouflage? Because what was denied to them by the upper caste would be taken by force by the lower caste. But they would be doing it under a camouflage so that it is not getting higher resistance. Okay? Once they gain power in terms of this two area, they would leave the camouflage and come into the open protest. I hope everyone is getting. First, it would be protest with camouflage. Once they gain power in terms of other, what we call, other stratification systems such as class and power, they would be going for the open protest. Okay? So, I believe that is something we could actually write in the subaltern perspective. A different perspective or understanding of the process of Sanskritization. According to Srinivas, I hope everyone is able to capture this point, right? According to Srinivas, Sanskritization as a process is happening because they are mimicking. Okay, they are not going for any innovation. It is just mimic of the upper caste ideology and rituals. Harold A. Gould, he would be saying, no, it is not mimicking. It is a protest under camouflage. Why it is a protest under camouflage? They would be, what we call doing things which were actually considered as sphere of upper caste previously. Okay, they are doing still under camouflage because they don't have class and power, right? They don't have money too much, they don't have power at that time. But as and soon they get this too, they would be going for the open protest. I hope everyone is able to make this in their diagram, or somehow we just note it down and we can move ahead. That would be another critique which you could write in terms of Sanskritization. Yes. See, end goal is just ascertains equality. Yes. Yes, the ritual way. Yes.
He says that the only reason they are protesting is
Equality, basically they were denied the things and now they are, as a protest, they are, you know, what you call, doing things that they were actually denied of.
Okay, so they don't want any.
Yeah, basically they are not, see, basically, okay, so you are not allowed to wear the sacred thread. These guys would be going for wearing the sacred thread because that was not allowed. From his perspective, it is doing because they are mimicking it. From his perspective, they are, what you call, taking it, you know, through some, whatever, you know, I hope everyone is able to understand this.
So they want to wear thread only to protest or to get recognition in the Brahmin.
Protest. It was protest. Yes. I think that is the thing with sociology. I believe a combination of both of the two would be able to explain things pretty well. That's true. That's true. See, that's true. That's true. But again, as I said, you know, we are not going to narrow it down to one single philosophy, which is very much prominent. We are just going to bring a dialogue between different philosophy, which I have been emphasizing since the first class, right? Sociology answer is more about dialogue between different perspective, and it is not about you choosing a single school of thought. Okay?
We can find that when they are making the way of life, we can use Srinivas, but when it comes
Exactly. That is the thing. Yeah. See, anyway, if you are writing Sanskritization or you are writing Srinivas, you are bound to write Harold Le Gold only to give a different perspective. Okay? A different perspective always is bound to give you more marks, and you guys have to bring different perspective in your answer. So this would actually just include the entire critique. Anything else that you come up with, or maybe in the, you know, down the lecture, if you are coming up with different thinkers, please try to relate it and, you know, write it down. Okay? So I have some to-do question to do, give it to you, and then we will end the class. Please write down the to-do question, which you guys have to do on your own. See, we have already discussed the Indological perspective, the structural functionalist perspective, and Marxist perspective. Okay? Now I'm going to, I believe whoever has this, you know, seen the how to maximize your score, the first lecture, in that I have talked about this question of land tenure system being evaluated from different perspective. Okay? That is the question that you have to do. Write down the question. Evaluate the British land tenure system. Evaluate the British land tenure system from sociological perspective. That is the first question that you guys have to do. Evaluate the British land tenure system from sociological perspective. Write down the second to do, very important. Write short note on village studies in Indian sociology. Village studies in Indian sociology. Village studies in Indian sociology. And I hope you will appreciate the point that village study did not started with Srinivas. Okay, please try to be as elaborate as possible when it comes to village study. Okay, thank you for today.